Welcome to our first episode of Media Weediya. This is the place where we're going to tell you what exactly the media is doing in India, especially. Some of what we will be talking about will also be about the international media, and we will bring to you especially the media bias when it covers certain events. We've got our panelists over here in the studio. Our panelists are Dr. Gautam Sen, ex-London School of Economics. We've got Tariq Areehy over here, also ex-London School of Economics. We also have with us today Dr. Prakash Shah, who is a reader in culture and law at the Queen Mary's University of London. Welcome to our show. Thank you very much for coming all the way up from various parts of the country to take place in this inaugural show of Media Weediya. So today we are going to talk about the church incidents which happened in India in the run-up to the Delhi election, and then even afterwards. We are going to discuss whether there was an inherent bias in the way that the media covered those events. So I'd just like to give you a bit of background about these events first. The interesting thing about this is, if we talk about the incident which happened with the Holy Child Auxilium School in Delhi, then we were told that actually no religious symbol had been touched at all. And yet the media ran it virtually continuously as an attack on Christians, as an attack on the church. There were other incidents which happened in Delhi. There was the Jasola incident. And in the Jasola incident, a stone had fallen inside the church. Again, the media ran it as an attack on the church, an attack on the minorities, an attack on Christians, and especially what they wanted to say, what the media effectively said in virtually every one of these cases, is that the Narendra Modi government was somehow responsible for all these quote-unquote attacks, right? The Vikaspuri incident, there were 3 criminals who were present. They were arrested. This was not connected with any religious group at all. And then, of course, in Rohini, in the Rohini incident in the Rohini church, there was a Christmas tree fire and there was a short circuit. So let's start by asking Gautam Sen over here. What do you think about this?
I think, the use of the term bias is too weak. In fact, looking back now that I'm over the shock at the incidents which happened, which I myself took to be potentially very serious, but now we know that the media orchestrated a campaign and used these incidents in a crass attempt to discredit the elected government of Narendra Modi. And it seems to me the issue is really an attempt to discredit the Prime Minister and the political party which rules India.
And would you say that this is still going on?
It seems to me, judging by what has been happening in the past few months, there is a pause and then there's a resumption of misreporting, malicious reporting, and always insinuating that somehow Narendra Modi himself represents these so-called fringe Hindu elements who are alleged to have been attacking Christian places of worship and Christians with abandon. Virtually every single instance that has been reported turns out to be falsely imputed to such groups, whatever they may be. Whether they exist, we don't know. And indeed, in the notorious case of the alleged rape of a 72-year-old son, it turns out the rapists actually had come from across the border and they have since been arrested and they are not Hindus.
Yes, and that was actually quite shocking, I thought, because she was 72 years of age. I'm not entirely certain whether a rape was proven or not. And then the media went to town about Hindu fringe groups. And in fact, if I remember right, somebody actually said that Ghar Wapsi, or some sort of reconversion to Hinduism, was somehow responsible for the attack on this 72-year-old none.
This was actually the opinion of the chair of the Minorities Commission of West Bengal, who said that these attacks had been incited by the so-called Ghar Wapasi, which really refers to a solitary incident in Agra,
Yes.
which was more drama than anything else.
Yes.
And we have since, of course, found out that no Hindus were involved in the raid. And very interestingly, no medical evidence has been confirmed to have been undertaken. No medical examination has been undertaken. And the nun was very rapidly spirited away, I believe, by private plane to an unknown destination.
Yes. And we don't know her whereabouts as yet.
Nothing that has been reported in the media. I would just like to add, you see, when the incidents are reported in this particular way, blaming the majority community for these really terrible crimes, which put us all to shame, there is no corresponding reporting that they have turned out to be false, no repudiation, no mea culpa, and the media carries on merrily as if they have had no responsibility for creating this terrible image of India. My own personal experience in North London is that many people who don't know India very well now regard it as the most lawless and criminal place in the world.
After this reportage.
After this reportage. And
is it also possible that this sort of reportage would create an element of distrust between the normal Christian community in India and the Hindu community in India? Is this also possible?
You see, by and large, Christians have lived peacefully in India as neighbors, and many of us have been to,
including you, and I'm sure,
to Christian schools.
And me.
We had no issues.
Yes.
The education was
fantastic,
really good.
Yes.
And we socialized, and of course.
And we feel a loyalty to these schools as well.
And we feel loyalty to these schools because we are taught to respect our teachers. And in fact, in my particular school, the famous Lamartine School of Calcutta, we counted amongst our former students the famous Keeler brothers who died in the 65 war as brave patriots.
Yes.
And there are many, and we have had numerous senior officers in the army, the navy, the air force who have served the country loyally, and we all respect these people. We may tease them and they may tease us back. But this is merely an indication of the fact that we are comfortable with each other.
Yes.
And this is what is being poisoned comprehensively in an orchestrated campaign in order to get to Mr. Narendra Modi.
Now, I mean, I can see that they want to maybe target the Prime Minister. But what could be their motive? What could be the media's motive in targeting the Prime Minister of India? I'd like to get in Prakash Shah into the discussion at this point. What do you think, Prakash?
I mean, it's interesting you referred to the incidents in Delhi and so on.
Yes.
In fact, I was watching some footage a few weeks ago of a documentary which was made by Sankrant Sanu.
Yes.
In fact, it's a very simple video where he interviews a member of the church in Mangalore.
Yes.
And that member of the church recounts the ways in which the bishops in Mangalore have broadcast ideas about protesting against incidents when incidents haven't even occurred. So in anticipation of incidents occurring, the community is galvanized, and obviously, as a loyal member of the church, you're more likely to listen to the priesthood of the church, and to follow whatever direction they're giving. And so you see that there is an orchestration of protesting and a culture of protesting, which seems to be highly organized in some kind of way. And perhaps some people might dismiss this as some kind of silly conspiracy theory, but it actually seems to be.
In Mangalore, was it also the case that those particular incidents were actually proved to have been done by Christians themselves?
Yes, apparently there are all kinds of let's say, suggestions that there is a kind of put up job.
I think there were seven Christians who were arrested in that particular case, if I remember right. At least they were charged, if I remember right.
In fact, they said that they wanted to create division in society and were instructed
to do so.
They themselves have said so, and it should be noted that they were arrested by the police force of the Congress-run Karnataka administration, which has nothing to do with the BJP or extremist Hindu
Yes.
political party.
Yes. In fact, Prakash and Gautam, we had an opportunity just before this interview to take a few comments from Robert Rosario, who is a Catholic from Mangalore. He had this to say.
Now, for example, other day there was an incident that in Mangalore, one of the church's glass was broken, and there was heavy media coverage that there is an attack on the church and something like that. After a few days, it was found that one of the church employees who was not paid properly, he threw some stone on the glass in the night time. He wanted to remove his anger, take his anger for not being paying, and it was nowhere connected with the community or this community or that community. Even such incidences they highlight as if it is an attack on the Christian community. In one more instance in Mangalore, the very Christian Catholic community youth have vandalized the plantation of the church. They have cut down all the plantations of banana plantation and all, and they put a flag of some Hindu flag planted there. So this is a typical incident where somebody wants to create some mischief and tension between two communities. And when media highlight this type of news as if it is a attack on the community, it is like pouring oil to the fire. Instead of behaving in a most proper manner, this type of coverage, I would think it will lead to tension in the community, which the media should not resort to, in my opinion.
Robert Rosario also had an interesting point to make about the persecution idea which the church frequently talks about, and we're just going to play it over here for you.
Now this persecution complex of the church is concerned. What I feel is it's a time-tested strategy of the church to play victim, and it is clinically manufactured strategy to keep the flock always in fear and a sort of dogma that we are always being victimized, we are always being held under threat, and there is a threat upon us for having faith in Christ or faith in God, something like that. Successfully they have managed this type of dogma over the masses. So I don't think it's a reality, but it is a clinically manufactured opinion, so that once you put in the minds of the people during Sunday sermons regularly, right from childhood up to elders, so they can't move out of this belief. And this church has used in a very systematic way over the years. So when there is one incident, small incident, we automatically connect it to say this dogma of belief that we are being victimized, though it is not. So I strongly feel that this is a clinically manufactured one, and not exactly the church is being persecuted in any way. Now what is persecution? When we say church is being persecuted, which is a classic example of persecution. Now I don't find anywhere all over India, I can't find a single incident which can be called as persecution of Christians. I have verified many examples, many incidences myself. I have gone into the details, but nowhere I felt that is a persecution of Christians. But there were other incidences related with local factors, your local relation with other people, irrespective of your community, caste and religion. When you interact with many people, you are bound to have some relation with other people. These incidences happen. So this is my finding.
I was very surprised when people were sort of saying that there are all these incidents, you see, of attacks, quote unquote. And of course now all of them, effectively all of them, including the one in Panvel, the one in Navi Mumbai, and that has been proven to be some sort of retaliation, revenge by a den of gamblers. Because the church wanted to close down the den of gambling, and so then they came and broke a few window panes and tried to do some vandalism.
I would say that in a country of 1.2 billion
Yes.
plus people, if there were no fringe elements, no extremists, I
Yes.
would be very surprised.
Absolutely.
And of course, the law must deal with them.
Yes.
They will never disappear completely. And I will have to recall terrible incidents have happened, like the burning of the
Yes.
Australian missionary Graham stays in this family.
With his
Which-
two 12-year-olds.
Which is
But that was a long time ago.
Nevertheless, these things
But
will
it did happen, and it was a
Full
terrible
force-
incident.
Full force of the law was applied, and it should be,
Yes.
because these are not acceptable in any civilized society. But I would also suggest now, looking carefully at the evidence and reflecting long and hard, that some of these fringe elements actually funded to carry out attacks. As it turns out, in the recent past, they were not fringe elements at all, but the fringe elements themselves are in the pay of agent provocateurs. So we must be very, very careful. And to this, I will also add that the Prime Minister himself, I think somewhat in haste, spoke directly to the Delhi Police Commissioner, which actually
Yes.
is not his job, it is the
No.
job of the Home Minister. But he was so alarmed and distressed at his reports that he actually
Had to. He had to. He had to.
breaking with tradition to speak directly with the Police Commissioner of Delhi to take action. Now it turns out all of these cases, these incidents, were completely fraudulent, designed to defame and slander, and it is my opinion that the government should now institute an investigation as to where it is being orchestrated, because in my view, this
Maybe even a CBI inquiry.
a CBI inquiry, and it is my belief that this is not just a local matter. Some of the issues that are arising have been prompted by evangelical organizations abroad,
Yes.
and I would not be shocked to find that foreign embassies of some Western countries are actively involved in the planning and incitement to defame this government.
That is interesting. We had an opportunity just before this interview to take a few comments from Robert Rosario.
Last November to January this year, there was exposition in Goa. Exposition of the so-called body of Saint Xavier, Saint Francis Xavier. His body was kept for veneration. Now, what is the history of this man? I find him the biggest criminal in the history of India. If you know about Hitler, if you know about Osama bin Laden, this man also comes in the same category. But the difference is, this man is a religious man. So Hitler was a king, whereas this man is a religious man. He is being canonized as a saint, and now being venerated. His crimes are so monumental and well documented. He is the one who brought in Inquisition, the so-called Holy Inquisition, into Goa in the year 1545. It continued till 1812. And it was so horrendous experience, such horrible torture of the worst kind to the people. So many people died under him, many people suffered injuries, many people fled Goa. So my ancestors also a part of the group which fled Goa. My ancestors came down to Mangalore. So given these circumstances, this man is venerated in independent India, and even today, even after 68 years of independence, which I just can't digest this. So I opposed it. I wrote to the Bishop of Goa and also to the Catholic Conference, President of the Conference of Catholic Bishops of India, and all concerned people to stop this exposition immediately and send the body to Portugal, because its original place is he belongs to Portugal. He should be sent there, and we are no more under the rule of Portuguese. We are an independent country, so he should be sent back. But the bishop did not oblige. He continued with the exposition and the so-called veneration. So I held a press conference in Mangalore. I did a press conference in Goa, and both these press conferences did not have a major coverage. Local media to some extent covered it. A section of the media covered it. But for major media, the mainstream media, it was not an issue at all. Though it is a major issue. Today we are crying, we are shouting of persecution. The real typical example of persecution we can find in Francis Xavier.
Just coming back to Prakash's point on the persecution, I mean, this idea that there is some sort of persecution of Christians going on. Now, if we look back into history textbooks, you will find that there is definitely some sort of an idea that Christians are always being persecuted, and that there is this idea of martyrdom even within Christianity itself. I'd just like to bring in Tariq Areehy into this discussion. And is this some sort of thing which is globally present at the moment even?
Well, I think historically speaking, if you look at the role of the Christian Church in world history, it's not been as a persecuted minority. It's more as being the persecutor. I mean, if you look back, say, to Western Europe, it was in fact the Christian Church which provided the bureaucratic and the administrative and the ideological structure which formed Western Europe as we know it now. And in fact, it was the Christian Church centered on the Abbey of Cluny in France,
yes,
which preached and organized the three crusades, one in Northern Europe, which not many people know, one in the Middle East, which most people know, and one in Portugal and Spain. So the Christian Church not only preached and organized this crusade, it actually it made the whole movement cohesive. It provided manpower and it funneled, and it's a long-term movement. And later on, when secularism spread in Western Europe, the Christian Church actually were the shock troops of colonialism. I mean, in India, in the Philippines, if you look at the history of Philippines and the Spanish invasions, you look at South America, and you know you have genocide, you have mass murder, millions of people killed, and the church played a central organizing role in this. And I think a part and parcel of this history is that the church has a totally different notion of time than, say, for example, if you look at the institutions of Hinduism in India,
yes,
you know, they're disparate, they have some fighting with each other, they've got very short time horizons. The Catholic Church goes back 2,000 years. So it has a very cohesive strategy. So 50 years, 100 years, 150 years, it doesn't really mean
right.
much to it, right? It has
right.
the institutional and the historical capital which it has accumulated. So henceforth you find, you know, like for example, what happened in Korea, virtually the majority of the Korean people who converted to Christianity. There's a massive
I think it's 30%, 40% in just a few years, isn't it?
And
yes.
massive attempt in China, but obviously they're repressed by the Chinese Communist
yes.
Party. And India, I think, really
is the last frontier.
Yeah, India is like the sort of the Shangri-La for the church. It's where the church. I mean, the church could really triumph, I think, because the church is organized. It has a very long time horizon. It has an institutional structure. It has a human capital, and is facing a disorganized, a disparate opposition. And it has the ability to not only use its own resources, but also, like the kind of incident that Gautam's been talking about, it can create an image of India in the West, of a lawless, a country, a disorderly country which is persecuting the Christians, and thereby it can pressurize the Indian government and create a great deal of space for itself, for its own activities. And I think you'll find within like next 20, 30 years, it will make massive inroads into India, because really on one hand you have an institution which has a long experience and slow methodical
yes.
Advance, and is facing an opposition which has no notion, which
yes.
basically...
do Hindus actually understand
I don't,
what the motives
I'll
of
give you
the
an
evangelical missionaries
I'll give you an
are?
example, right, analogy.
Especially the new ones, yes.
Yeah, what happened this is slightly going back, but what happened in Spain and Portugal, when the church, the Abbey of Cluny, decided that they wanted to reconquer Spain for Christianity, they organized a movement which was they preached an ideology. They organized the military. They not only did they ideologically prepare the West for an advance into Spain and Portugal, but they actually brought in immigrants. They recruited people from Germany, from France, from Britain, from Belgium, to come and settle the conquered areas slowly, year by year by year. Over 200 years, they advanced at a rate of like half a mile a year, or very, very slowly.
Right.
Very slowly. But the opposition...
They had a very long...
they had a very long-term view. But the opposition they were facing were totally... this reminds me of India. They were fighting each other. They had no idea of what sort of enemy they were facing. So it was like, if you look back, it was a battle that was always going to be lost to them. They were never going to stand a chance.
Yes.
And any reverse that the Spaniard Muslims advances made were very temporary, because they were just one-off. Somebody would arise, make a little movement, but he'd die and that would be gone. But the church was always there. The institutions were there. The resources were there. And it was a methodical advance over hundreds of years. I think in India you find the same, because whatever the movements opposing the church in India, these are not organized the way the church is organized.
So you're actually bringing a very interesting thing to light, that this is not about religion per se. This is about power.
It's
and
politics.
Politics.
Because the
This
church,
is about politics.
I would just add to what Tariq has said, with which I concur, is that it is true that Christians were persecuted people under the Roman Empire.
Yes.
And they developed that into an ideology of persecution and martyrdom.
Yes.
But there was a third dimension to this, which is a very important one, which non-Christians seem to not understand. That when a sinner came to confess their sins, one of the first questions is, how many did you bring to the church? Conversion is central to the church. Without conversion, there is no church.
Yes.
And you see, once Constantine made Christianity the official religion of the empire, it took several more emperors to have it fully established. And by the way, he adopted Christianity because he felt it was his Christian faith which allowed him to win a military victory.
Right.
A military victory is what led him to espouse Christianity. And Christians initially tolerated all the other so-called polytheistic pagan religions.
Yes.
Pagan, by that way, is a term of abuse that Christians have used. Pagans never call themselves pagans.
Correct.
But anyway, over time, once they acquired dominance, they simply erased all other competitors. They just destroyed them by use of force. Every kind of opposition.
Native America, for example, in America, was that what sort of happened?
No, in the Americans, actually, it was the church provided the ideology, but this was really a conquest of Europeans of land.
Okay.
And that required the elimination of the local population. Christianity was simply an ideology which justified it. But these were mundane, commercial, and individual personal reasons.
And do you think that this sort of thing could happen in India, where the entire culture and all of the things associated with Hinduism could be erased?
You see, first of all, I would like to preface this by saying that the church is not a free agent anymore.
Yes.
The church is an arm's length tool of the foreign policy of major powers, particularly the United States. Where it cannot send Marines, which is India, they send their padres. Now, this may be denied by many, but I'm afraid this is the hard fact, the hard truth, that the church is being used to subvert and colonize countries like India and Nepal. Now, I don't think they will seek to convert all of India. It is too big, it will take too long. But they want a veto. They're only talking about 25-30% of Christians. That means they have a veto over the Indian polity. Already you will recall.
Yes.
The US government...
Well, it's an attempt to change the demographics of India. And once you change the demographics, you change every election.
And the politics.
And therefore the politics.
Now we know from the WikiLeaks evidence...
Just to interrupt you, I don't think there is much of a space between, say, Western foreign policy and the church. I think they are really well integrated.
Completely.
There's never...
Why do you say that? Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, if you historically, not going too far along, if you look at the role that the church has played in terms of advancing colonization, the church has always been there as one of the pillars of colonial rule. Because what the church has done, for example, in Africa, the church actually made the natives, the local inhabitants, ideologically, it made them accept, it made them conform to by making them feel that somehow the societies they came from, that they were in, were inferior, were fallen societies. It made them conform and hold up to the West at a higher level and look up to it, and therefore accept colonial rule.
And therefore, sort of, Christianity has almost become, is it almost an instrument of foreign policy, which Christians themselves don't understand, maybe?
I think so, yeah.
I think, particularly in the West, I think many ordinary Westerners and Christians themselves may not really understand
this, yes.
Of that. But I just wanted to say one thing. I mean, it's not as if the parts of the Indian government or the parts of the Indian state structure haven't taken steps to control this movement. I think you can go as far back as the 1960s, where you see anti-conversion legislation being passed, I think for the first time in Orissa.
Yes.
And then there's been a replication of that kind of legislation with some differences in different parts of
In
India.
Gujarat, for example,
Yeah.
yes. And even in Tamil Nadu, yeah.
Yes, and so in the recent past, in the last year or so, there's also been mooted the idea of having a pan-Indian anti-conversion legislation.
Yes.
And so part of the strategy of the churches, I think, can also be seen in that light.
To prevent that,
yes,
maybe.
to almost prevent that and say, look, we are going to go ahead with our plans for expansion, proselytization, conversion, and so on. And there's very little you can actually do to stop us, because if you try to, we have these kinds of
mechanisms,
propaganda measures, if you like, to put you under the spotlight.
You know, this is
a lie.
Historical intimidation is what taking place in response to this potential threat. And as we know, the government has quietly been examining how many NGOs are operating
Yes.
illegally and closing them down. Now, this is partly a response to that, because many of these NGOs are actually Christian fronts. So they are already preemptively trying to prevent the state moving any further. But we must remember this one episode where we have the evidence
Yes.
of WikiLeaks, where the US government sponsored a Christian protest against the Kudankulam nuclear plant
Yes,
on the
yes,
grounds that
Kudankulam,
we
yes,
did all this
Kudankulam
work for
plant.
the Indo-US nuclear court, and the others running away with all the orders. So this was actually
Yes.
organized by the US government through its Christian surrogates. Now, this is a very important watershed, the behavior of these surrogates. In the past, Christians who were converted at earlier times, for example, 19th century Bengal,
Yes.
they were actually quite assimilated culturally.
Correct. Yes.
They were Christian in
Yes,
faith, but
exactly.
they were culturally Bengali and
Exactly.
Christian.
But this was the point I was trying to make. Yes.
And in fact, you know, I have to tell you, a very dear Christian friend of mine, who used to live in London for almost 60 years, every year wrote the introduction to the meaning of Durga Puja for the
Yes.
brochure.
Yes. Exactly.
Beautifully.
Exactly.
And
this was the level of integration. Exactly.
And he said, I am Christian and I'm a Hindu in some ways. What is happening now with the new converts is
And
that
the new missionaries.
they erase all traces of their Hindu
Yes.
antecedents.
Yes.
They will shun the bindi.
Yes.
They will not wear
And they
symbols
will,
like
in fact,
bangles.
not want prasad.
And
Not
they
take
will
prasad.
not have prasad, which most of my Christian friends didn't worry about. They were
Yes.
a bit like me, whether you could take it or not take it, it's perfectly
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
And this is the new Christian convert who is deeply hostile to all things Hindu. And if you look on
And
the
all things Muslim as well.
and-
and also-
Which actually is a real problem. I think in India,
Yeah.
if I may just make this short point, that in India the problem is the issue I think which I'm thinking about is you've got 15 to 20% Muslim population,
Yeah.
which is by and large actually pretty peaceful and living with Hindus
Yeah.
for a very long time.
Yeah.
Now, if the Hindus get converted, let us say 25, 30, 40% to Christianity, do you think that these Christians, especially these Christians, not the old style Christians which Gautam over here was talking about, do you think that these people will be able to live peacefully with these Hindus, or whether it will become in some ways almost parts of other countries like Nigeria, where you have a bloodbath routinely every 6 months?
I think the North will become even more marginalized.
Right.
Another thing that I want to stress is that for India, looking at from India's position, if this narrative of persecution becomes a dominant narrative about India in
Yes,
the West,
yes.
then every Indian government is going to be under pressure. They're going to.
And so this is the idea.
Yeah.
This is the
because-
political idea.
Yeah, they're always going to be under pressure, and they're always going to be under pressure. They're going to be forced to commit themselves to policies or really not sustain their own interest vigorously as they should. I mean, say, as for example, the Chinese might do. So the Indians will be always under pressure.
Right.
If this. And the
Okay.
second thing,
Okay, one second. I've really got to take a break. I've got to take a break. So we'll just take a break, and when we come back, we'll discuss this
Yeah.
point a bit further. Cut, okay?